What do you like about corn?
It's cold. A good little Vietnam. It has the juice.
Hey, what are you doing? Jamming to the corn song. Have you heard it? Yes, bro, but that was like a year ago. Okay. It still slaps though. What would slap is a Korean corn dog, speaking of corn. You know, those don't actually have any corn in them. Well, actually, no one cares. You know what else still slaps? What? Me.
If you've watched my channel pretty much at all, then you've probably heard me say this almost every week. Korean and Mexican cuisines are my favorite, and I was craving corn at this time, so I decided to try this little mashup. I'm just going to take you through 2 recipes from each cuisine that are almost all centered around corn. We've got Korean corn dogs and corn cheese, and then we have Mexican elotes and esquites. Most of these are popular street foods that you can find in each country. Starting with Korea, we're going to go through the viral Korean corn dogs. And this is the one recipe that doesn't have any corn at all in it. It's just based on the American corn dog, which has cornmeal as part of the batter. But this version is either a partial cheese or full cheese inside, wrapped in a yeasted kind of dough instead of a batter, and then usually some potatoes and panko on the outside. And by the way, I'm making very small amounts of all of these recipes just so I don't overload myself. But what I'll say and put in the description is usually enough for about 4 people to snack on. So into a loaf pan, I'm adding 2 cups or 240 grams of all-purpose flour, 240 milliliters or 1 cup of warm water, and then 7 grams or like a packet of active dry yeast, and 10 grams or 2 teaspoons of sugar, a small pinch of salt, and then I'm just mixing all that together until it's homogeneous. This is a very wet dough and I'm not kneading this, but I'm just going to cover this and let this sit for about an hour to let the yeast start to rise. Meanwhile, I can get my other ingredients ready. I'm going to grab a block of mozzarella cheese. I'm just using a hot dog to kind of cut it into the same thickness. And then I'm also cutting little chunks of a hot dog because I'm going to alternate those on the skewer. You can decide if you just want this to be more corn dog-like with just one hot dog. Any kind of thin sausage would work, by the way. Or you can cut little chunks like I'm doing and then alternate pieces of hot dog and mozzarella cheese. Or you can go all cheese, which I'm going to do with 1 or 2 of mine. I'm also peeling a russet potato and just cutting a little bit of it off and then cutting those into really small dice. And then into another baking tray, I'm just adding a good bit of panko. So once your dough has sort of proofed, we're going to grab our skewers and then start to roll them in the batter. This is kind of tricky to do, and if you mess up, it kind of ruins it, so you have to be careful. You're just trying to roll this and spiral it down until it covers all the contents of the skewer. I had a couple of little openings, and that's not the biggest deal in the world because we have more stuff to cover this with. And I don't know the best way to do this, but I'm just trying to squeeze on some of the chunks of potato first. They didn't really stick that well, so I don't know how the street vendors do it. But regardless, I'm just rolling this in the panko and getting all the rest of the surface coated. Meanwhile, I had a medium saucepan of oil heating up to about 350 Fahrenheit. You can just toss in your skewers and then turn them occasionally so browning is even. I think mine took like 4 or 5 minutes or so. You just don't want the cheese to start leaking out. And then as soon as these come out, I'm putting them on a wire rack and hitting them with some sugar. That sweet coating on the outside is what makes these so addictive. And traditionally, you just cover these in some ketchup and mustard. I'm not a huge fan of those, so if I didn't have to take a thumbnail, I would just add some kewpie mayo and call it a day. Make it your own. Parts of this process are tricky, but the result is always really nice. A really sweet and savory, unhealthy snack to eat on the street. Let's go over to Korean corn cheese. This is typically served as a side item when you go to Korean barbecue. It's really just what it sounds like, cheesy corn. It's super easy. You can use canned corn for this, but I'm husking some fresh corn because it's better. Clean that off, and the best way to cut these kernels off is to use 2 bowls of differing sizes. Invert the smaller bowl into the bigger one and just put your corn on top. It gives you a platform to cut and you can reach all the way down without making a mess. For this recipe, I would use about 2 ears of corn. Into a hot cast iron, I'm adding a little bit of neutral oil. And then I'm going to saute about a half of a yellow onion that I've diced, as well as the whites of 2 scallions. After about 5 minutes, those will become translucent and soften a bit. I'm then going to add an optional 1 to 2 jalapenos that I've diced without the ribs and seeds. Soften those for an additional 2 to 3 minutes, and then we can add in our corn. I just like to get some browning on the corn. It only takes about 3 more minutes. Add some salt and pepper to taste here. At that point, I'll remove it from heat and then add about a 1/4 cup of kewpie mayo. That will melt into all the ingredients and bind everything together. Give it a couple teaspoons of sugar to make it sweeter. And then I'm going to cover this in 150 grams or 5 to 6 ounces of shredded mozzarella cheese. You gotta shred this stuff yourself for the best cheese pulls. I add that to a 350 Fahrenheit oven to let the cheese melt. I didn't do this perfectly the first time around because of all the other foods I was cooking at the same time, but best practice is once the cheese is just melted, take this and stick it under the broiler to brown it. Or if you have a torch like this, you can use that and be a little more accurate. I made a second batch after the video just so I could focus on it more and make it a little nicer. Top with the greens from those 2 scallions, and this is your corn cheese. If you eat it right away, then you should get a really nice cheese pull like this. If you have to let it sit under a warmer for a while, then you'll get what you see at my taste test. Still amazing either way and super easy to throw together. On to Mexico, and I have to make a clarification here. I always thought the difference between elotes and esquites was one was on the cob and one was in a bowl, but really those two terms are used to distinguish between the north and south versions of this dish in Mexico. The real way to distinguish between what I'm making is to call one elotes and one elotes en vaso, which means just in a cup. Gracias, Jackie, for that clarification. Anyway, for the on the cob version, there's a few ways to do this, but I'm doing it indoors, so I'm gonna husk it first. Alternatively, you could leave it in the husk and grill it for a few minutes outside, but this will get pretty similar results. I'm just sticking this on my gas stove over a medium-low heat and just turning it until it's browned. This will start popping, which is kind of cool, but you're just trying to get nice charring all around. This will take maybe 8 to 10 minutes, just don't go over too high of a heat. The rest is really easy. I'm just sticking these on some more bamboo skewers, and you can customize how you do this however you like. I'm giving them some mayo all around, which will get a nice creamy base and then allow everything else to stick. I'm then adding some lime zest and lime juice to this. The better way to do this would be to mix these into the mayo first, and that'll allow for a more homogeneous coating. Oh well. I like to add some chipotle chili powder as well as some tajin, and then finish up with some crumbled queso cotija, some chopped cilantro if you can make that stick, and then I like to add some flaky salt on top for a salty bite. You can find lots of crazy recipes for this online. There's so many ways to make it, but this is how I like mine. Now the en vaso version is very similar and in my opinion easier to eat. I'm going to grill the corn in the same way, but this time I'm going to cut it off of the cob like I did for the corn cheese. And something looked weird about this corn, so I just decided to use canned corn from here. You would do this in a bigger bowl, but I'm only making one serving like I said, but here's the amounts for a bigger bowl. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of mayo as well as 2 tablespoons of softened butter, 2 tablespoons of queso cotija, another diced jalapeno, and 1 clove of minced garlic, salt and pepper to taste, and the juice of half of a lime. Finish with a handful of chopped cilantro and as much chipotle chili powder as you want. Mix all that together, and if this was in a bigger bowl, then you would divide this into some single servings from here. And then into those single servings, I like to add some more queso cotija, chili powder, cilantro, and lime wedges. This is a super satisfying snack, and it's probably my favorite thing out of all the things I made today. It might just be the easiest thing to make as well. But since we made all 4 of these dishes at the same time, it's time to taste test them side by side.
I will never not be excited about these foods. Each of these deserves their own video. I don't really know why I paired them because these videos don't really seem to do well for me anyway, but it just seemed like a good idea because these are all pretty much iconic street foods, except for the corn cheese, but all iconic foods regardless in these respective countries. I guess I'm gonna go ahead and start with one of these Korean corn dogs. Again, even though there's no corn in this at all. Cheers. I mean, that is just a glorified mozzarella stick, pretty much what you'd expect. I guess I need to get down to the hot dog layer to get a taste of that. And yeah, that kind of tastes like a corn dog with just panko on the outside instead of a corn coating. Super simple. I wish I had more potatoes on it, but I didn't do a good job of adhering those. But it's a super simple food and it just tastes amazing. I guess while I'm eating Korean, I'm gonna dive into this corn cheese. I definitely let this sit too long, keeping warm in the oven, and the cheese kind of hardened. This was the first thing I made, and there was just no way I could do this all at the same time. Either way, the flavors are there, and this is amazing. It's just not the stretchy cheese that I was looking for. This is a great side item for Korean barbecue. The sauteed onion and jalapeno come through and make a really good base, and this is just heartwarming. And now moving on to Mexico with these elotes, which I've never actually had these. I've always gotten the esquites because it's just easier, but you know this is gonna be amazing. Really, if you're making corn on the cob for dinner, this is really not much more work at all, but it is well worth it. All those Mexican flavors come through and punch you in the face like they do. The tajin and chili powder make a sharp punch on the outside compared to the inside, which is creamy from the mayo. I really never cook corn on the cob, but if I ever do, I'm doing it like this every time. And then last but not least, the esquites. This is my preferred way to eat it, just out of convenience. That garlic being uncooked is a little bit pungent. You could leave it out or cook the corn in it with the butter at first before you mix everything together. But still, this is just an indulgent snack that everyone has to try. But that's it. I just enjoyed sharing some more of my favorite cuisines with everybody. These are iconic and world-renowned foods for a reason. And everything I did today was super simple. The hardest thing was these corn dogs just because of the deep frying, but very approachable to anyone that wants to try it. That's gonna do it for me today. Thank you all for watching. Be blessed, and I'll see you next time. Let's do a full mozzarella one now. Worst cheese pull of all time.